This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Red Dwarf USA.
Holly, where is everyone?
There was an accident, Dave. A radiation leak. The entire crew was subjected to a lethal dose of cadmium-2.
Is everyone okay?
Everybody's dead, Dave. That's what lethal means.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast with all my childhood crushes. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Who are your childhood crushes? The Daphne from Frasier and Dax from Deep Space Nine?
Perfect, you got them both.
That's it, huh?
Great choices for the show.
I remember I had a friend in high school and his big crush was Sandra Bullock, and I always thought that was odd. I don't know why.
No, it's a good one too. I'm a big fan.
Mine are from people that, if you check their ages, they're much, much too old now. I'd be like, ooh, Anne Margaret.
Yeah, you like,
but she's like my grandmother's
Edith
age.
from All in the Family.
That's right, Edith.
All right, Jordan. Well, this week we are getting in to a failed pilot, like 1.5 failed pilots, really.
Yeah.
For an Americanized version of the British cult classic Red Dwarf.
More like White Dwarf, am I right?
I believe on the Wikipedia they mentioned that the creators started calling it that because they eventually removed all people of color from the show.
Yeah. Although we were just talking before we started recording. I did watch a very tiny documentary, like a 30-minute thing, just about a little behind the scenes of how this kind of came about. And the British showrunner who was sort of involved in this, he
Rob Grant or
made
Doug
a point.
Naylor.
I guess it was one of those guys, and he mentioned he was like, "Look, it was unintentional." He's like, "We didn't realize till afterwards we were trying to fix it." He's like, "Yes, it happened, but it wasn't like we were purposely trying to do it." Not that that's maybe the best excuse, but it wasn't a conscious decision, regardless.
Right. I mean, you would assume it wasn't them since they have far more people of color in their version. So I just assumed it was the American networks who were like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, well, I mean, not to get too deep into it, but what it really was they just had decided that the person who was playing, quote unquote, the cat, it just wasn't as good, and they were never going to find someone as good as the British version. So they were just like, let's just go in a complete different direction. What if we just made it a woman? And so that's really what it was.
Right, and women only come in the white variety. So.
There you go. That's been well established in the science fiction shows we've watched.
That's true. At any rate, are you familiar with the original series?
You know, I know the name Red Dwarf just through whatever cultural osmosis, but I never watched the show. I didn't really know much about it. I actually kind of thought it was more like, I don't know why, but I thought it was like a hard sci-fi kind of show. I didn't realize it was a comedy, which is kind of silly, but I just didn't realize.
Oh, wow. So you literally have never seen an episode.
No. Have you?
I mean, for some reason, I've definitely seen like 2 or 3 episodes over the course of my life, whether it was just maybe I was at a friend's house who had cable or something, and someone.
Well, it's been on a long time.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple episodes, and it's possible I've even seen the pilot. I mean, I can't be sure, but yeah, I've seen it like a couple episodes here and there, and I remember it being interesting. Like I don't remember like disliking it when I saw it. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't easily accessible, I don't think.
I think when this had started, I think it was 88, right, when it started. If
Something
this
like
had been airing somewhere available for us in North America, I don't think this would have tickled my fancy at all, you know? Even at its best iteration.
It was available in North America on PBS, apparently.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. It wouldn't have tickled your fancy? You weren't into the British humor?
No, I mean, and it's not even really a question of the quality. I just think there's a certain level of enjoyment that one gets out of that kind of comedy. We mentioned this when we were doing Other Space, and you had mentioned, you know, how far that show in, you know, how much enjoyment you got really is based on how much you can enjoy kind of sketch comedy. And I sort of feel the same way about this, is like that Monty Python-esque kind of humor. How far does that go for you? For me, it's not really my thing, and I understand and can appreciate it, but I'm not sitting back going like, whatever, I don't know, quoting Monty Python sort of thing.
Yeah, you're more of a Quark fan.
That's right. Feeding tubes all the way.
Well, the pilot for the American version was intended to come out during the NBC 1992 season, which would have been, I believe, just after the 4th series had been on air in the UK. So
I'm trying to remember what would have come out here in 92. Like, what would have been, like, I know shows that were on the air, but I'm trying to think of something that came out in 92. Do you know?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I know Batman Returns came out in 1992.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I was excited.
I'm sure you were lining up at the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad annoyed to be there.
No, I went with my grandfather to Batman Returns.
How'd he enjoy it?
He said to me he only wanted to go because of Christopher Walken. That's what he said to me.
Are you a big Christopher Walken fan, eh?
Apparently.
Very strange. Well, the adaptation of like this pilot itself was an adaptation of the original British pilot.
Right.
But it was obviously kind of some rewrites were done, and the writer credited on the pilot is a gentleman named Linwood Boomer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I looked into a little bit, and he's had a long career.
Yeah, I assume you were already a fan, Jordan, since you're a big fan of Little House on the Prairies.
I am a fan of Little House on the Prairie.
Do you know who he is on Little House on the Prairies?
No.
Adam Kendall.
Hold on, which one's Adam? Oh, is he the blind guy that married Mary?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I didn't realize it was the same guy. I saw all his like writing stuff. I didn't realize he was old blind boy. I shouldn't say that.
Used to watch it all the time. Used to watch him all the time, not knowing he became a writer.
I also didn't know it was syndicated by the time I was watching. Thought those were live.
Can I guarantee that you had a crush on Little House on the Prairie?
Oh, no, one of the characters in Little House on the Prairie? I'd have to remember. Maybe Ma.
But yes, he later became a TV writer, and I think he's probably best known for creating Malcolm in the Middle.
Mm-hmm. I saw that. I mean, that's a pretty good little trophy on your shelf.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a well-respected show. He really went on to he had a very illustrious career.
Mm-hmm. And Red Dwarf USA.
And you know what else, Jordan?
What's that?
I think he's Canadian.
Oh, really? Hey, there's another for us. He should be on one of our sad little walks of fame somewhere.
I bet you we gave him an award at some point.
Yeah, guarantee. He could walk into any city and any store and just take what he wants.
At any rate, he wrote the pilot and was kind of the creative force on the U.S. side, though at some point the creators of the original one, who he mentioned, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, they stepped in and did a rewrite on the pilot. And I'm sure it was in your little documentary, but I saw something like there was some sort of like anonymous vote for the cast to vote for which version of the script they like better.
So I'll tell you quickly from what I learned what kind of happened. So they took, as you said, the British version and they went, let's write our own version of it. They casted it, blah blah blah, and they got to the point where they did the table read and it didn't go well. But they kept kind of progressing with it, and then sort of in the 11th hour, the two British showrunners who were kind of tangentially involved were like, why don't you let us try to rewrite this? And they were like, no, we don't want you to rewrite it. And they're like, well, let us try if we can write a script tonight. And so they said, okay, if you can write a script tonight. They went home, wrote a script, liked it, came back the next day, and this guy Linwood, what's his name? The American version guy?
Yeah, Linwood Boomer.
He was basically like, I don't want to do that script. And so there was like a push and pull. So they then went and secretly gave all the scripts to the cast and had the cast read them, and then as whether this is true or not, they said the cast all liked the second version, did do a vote. Everyone voted for the second script. They said, okay, we'll shoot it, but then went back and they went, sure, and just shot the first script with some modifications to kind of pretend they were shooting the second one, but ended up just doing what they had wanted anyways, and then no one was happy.
That sounds like it was a fun production.
Yeah, it sounds like no one really enjoyed it, which was kind of sad. It just sounds like it was not going well from the beginning, and yeah. Anyways, that was the first version.
Yeah, and then I guess what happened after they shot this first pilot is the studio execs sort of weren't entirely happy with how it turned out, obviously. So they brought the UK creators to America, and they're like, hey, let's do a partial recast, and then we'll give you like $100 and a garage. And that's
what they said. They said it was literally like a couple $1,000s tops is all they gave them.
You can tell when you see it, but what they did is they took the footage from the original pilot, some of the footage from the original pilot. They took some footage from the British show, and then they kind of just shot like really basic, like there's literally one scene that's in front of like a white curtain, and they just like brought in and sort of shot a new version of it, and like most of the cast remains, but as you said, they switched out the cat character with Terry Farrell from Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also switched out one of I think the what's his name, Lister, I think, No, not Lister. The other one. One of the guys. They switched out one of the other dudes on it.
Rimmer.
Thank you.
Yeah,
they switched out one of them just to see if it would play better, and kind of did a weird thing. So we've kind of watched all of that stuff for this particular podcast.
Yeah, and we should say that this is now available on YouTube, but for years it was like a kind of prized pirate thing that kind of made its way around conventions of this, like, the myth and legend of this horrible remake. As per people who really like Red Dwarf, I think it's pretty unanimous that no one enjoyed this American reboot. And I'll say this without even talking about the quality of this thing that we're this pilot that we watched. I think it has a fan base that loves what it is. So no matter what they did, this probably wouldn't have been pretty well regarded. I would imagine, like they would have had to really hit a home run with it. I think that's maybe unfair expectations for something.
I think British humor translated to American humor, there can be a gap between those two things, and this one does not figure out a way to bridge that gap. I mean, The Office did it at some point, but this certainly didn't.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, before we get into it, since the show was supposed to come out in 1992, there were 3 shows we've watched, a series and like a pilot, 2 series and a pilot for a Continuum Drag in 1992. Can you guess what was on the air in 1992 that we've watched?
What was the one with the robotic dog? Was that 92?
The robotic dog. I don't remember. So no.
Okay. I would say A Man and Machine.
That's one of them.
When did Cherry 2000 or whatever that come out?
Cherry 2000.
Didn't we watch that?
What is
Am I
Cherry
thinking
2000?
my own life?
What are you talking about?
I think it's something I watched on my own time. Disregard. I don't remember. That's the only one I can think of.
Was also Steel Justice.
Oh, Steel Justice. Who could forget?
Yeah, the robot dinosaur, the monster truck.
Yeah.
And, of course, Nightmare Cafe with Robert Englund.
Wow, Nightmare Cafe was all the way back in 92?
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought it was like 95. I don't know why.
Well, there you go.
There you go, 1992. What a big year. And you know what happened the year after, Luke? Your childhood dreams were made. 1993, Jurassic Park comes out.
That's right. Big year for me.
You were still reeling from the failure of Red Dwarf, but it was all made better when Jurassic Park came out.
I mean, it was sad. It's a good year for me because as we said off the top, I'm a fan of Jane Leeves from Daphne from Frasier and Terry Farrell from Deep Space Nine. Both of them, like immediately after shooting the show, end up on both of the shows because Frasier and Deep Space Nine come out in 1993. So big year all around.
And I'll say I don't remember the gentleman's name. I don't know if you have it in front of you. Who plays the lead in this? I feel bad for the guy because he seems like a genuinely nice person, and he also was a huge fan of Red Dwarf, the original version, and he sort of seemed really bummed out how bad the American version is, at least in his opinion. And he sort of took a lot of flack from people, a lot of people saying like he's too handsome for the role, and he just wasn't right for it, and kind of slagging him off. And he kept saying like, I know I'm not right for the role. He's like, but I love the show and I want to do it. And then right after this, he got offered the role on a small show of Friends of Joey, and he turned it down.
Oh no.
And so I looked at his IMDb since. He's worked a lot. Like he's in episode here, episode there, but he doesn't have Friends money, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he never quite got that like breakout.
Yeah. But he genuinely seemed bummed that Red Dwarf didn't happen because he was a fan, and he also understands that while filming, he's like, this is not going to be good.
Right. Well, let's get into it. Here's the IMDb summary for Red Dwarf USA. The adventures of the last human on Earth, an evolved cat, a hologram, and a senile computer stuck 3 million years in deep space.
This sort of premise of kind of the last, someone stuck in space and trying to get home, whatever. This is a well-worn trope. Not that it's a bad thing, but we've even seen it a few times and stuff, right? I mean, not even.
Yeah.
What was the one we just watched recently about the 2 dudes deciding who's going to kill the other one because there's only so much oxygen left?
Oh, that's Lost in Space, I believe it's called. Something like that.
Something like that. Anyways,
trapped in space.
One of those. It's interesting to see. Obviously, that is a very different tone, a very different idea, but it's that same basic concept of you're the last person and you got to get somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, this has a lot of tropes in it. It's the Lost in Space one. You're far from home and it's going to take forever to get back. A very hard sci-fi version of that. You've got you've been put in stasis and wake up hundreds of thousands of years later. A real that's a classic.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We've seen that too.
It's got a lot of the tropes you've seen, and they're always just reshuffled, and it's not a bad idea, and I kind of like the kickoff to this one.
Let me ask you though, do you think? Obviously, I'm saying this knowing that Red Dwarf, the original version, has been going for nearly 30 years, and obviously the English do it differently and take breaks sometimes for some reason in between seasons, but it's been going strong for a long time, so it's been very successful. But it seems like on what we've watched, sci-fi comedy has been not terribly successful.
It's a difficult. I think it's a very difficult genre to master and get right.
I wonder why though. That's, I guess, my point is that all these tropes and stuff seem like they lend themselves to pretty good storytelling, but for whatever reason, that mix of humor and sci-fi seems, I don't know, to be a hard thing to nail down.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, sci-fi is a very niche market in some aspects, and comedy needs to be very broad and hit a big audience. So what you've done is you've very much limited your audience as to who's going to watch it, and then you have to also get the comedy right.
Well, I just think if the jokes are sort of that Mrs. Noah-esque of can you believe this hilarious technology for this one gag exists? I just don't know how well that does. Do you know what I mean? It's a toilet that plunges itself. It's the future. You're like, okay, great. And not that this leans into that much, but it is interesting to kind of see the difficulties that I think this we'll discuss as the difficulties in trying to make this funny.
It's a tough one to nail down, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, this one starts off with a pretty great gag. I know you loved it. Where it's a Star Wars scrolling text gag.
Yeah, that goes way too fast. That's the gag, is that it has a lot of information and it goes by so fast that there's no way you could read it.
Yes. And I mean, essentially what this rolling text is, it's laying out classically what Star Wars does. It's we're in the future, and in the future we can travel to other worlds and set up colonies. That's what's going on. And then halfway through it, they're but we can't afford to tell that story, so we're going to tell you a story about an old mining ship. And then it just keeps getting faster and faster. And then we in the YouTube times can kind of pause and look at it. And mostly what it is the writer just starts talking about how hard it is to write this and how fast the text is going and how only people with fancy freeze frame VCRs are going to be able to see this.
Right. It's not a bad gag.
It's a bad gag, I think.
I mean, it's not a bad gag. Again, it's I don't know if it's particularly hilarious, but it's fine. I get why it's funny on paper.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work, but it was, I see what they're going for.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, can we talk about the ship?
Yeah, then we get into a credit sequence where we really get to see the ship itself, and you could really tell they're stealing in this pilot from all the miniature work they did for the original British series.
Yeah, so they mention that Red Dwarf, that's the name of the ship, which is a reddish kind of ship, and it's very sort of bulbous. I don't know how you describe it. It's because they really need it to be bigger than big. They mention, and I know it's kind of a gag, but they mention it has a bowling alley and a mall, and I think they said a football stadium is in it, and they show a whole thing, which is obviously a joke, because why would it be that big?
A 0G football stadium, Jordan, not just a football stadium.
There you go. But to make that work, the ship is humongous. It's bigger
enormous,
than any sort of
crew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And eventually, it's a bit of a long lead up, and we get this intro from the computer, the computer's name is Holly, and it is a classic talking head computer, we'll get an actor to play the computer. Their head always appears on the screen and sort of a little bit pixelated. And this is, of course, played by Jane Leeves from Frasier.
She's fine in the role.
It's nice. She's kind of, she maybe more than anyone, because she's British, can kind of handle the attempts at humor they're making. You can kind of do that straight man kind of work. Eventually, though, we kind of meet the rest of the cast. It's a big ship, so it's hard to know at first who's going to be your lead cast. But when you finally kind of start meeting them, we see there's a gentleman named Dave Lister, who's I guess he's on the repair crew, and he's definitely the leading man of this.
Yeah, and he's sort of I believe in the British version, the kind of joke is a little bit of a class joke. He's sort of a blue-collar working type. And I think that's still what they're going for here. And again, one of the criticisms was that this guy's too good looking, as opposed to, if you're blue collar, you can't be good looking for some reason. But anyways, he's sort of I think
it's very funny because I've seen obviously the UK version. I don't think the man who's lead on that he's a very handsome man. I think I don't know what the difference is.
I don't know. It is anything I've seen. They just keep going and really ragging on this guy as if he's like Fabio. And I was like, he looks like a dude. I don't know if it's that big a criticism. And I think he's perfectly fine. And he has that little bit of that hint of Han Solo rapscallion kind of vibe to him.
Yeah. what we know about him really is that he's on the Red Dwarf because at some point he got drunk in Detroit and then woke up on the park bench on the fourth moon of Saturn and had to take a job on this freighter in order to pay his way home.
That's okay. It's not a bad gag.
Then there is the other sort of lead character, I'd say. I mean, there's a few, but this is the sort of second hand is Arnold Rimmer, played by a gentleman named Chris Eagleman in the first pilot. Who
Eigelman.
I know him quite well because he's in all of Whit Stillman's independent films, very good films. And I was like, whoa, what's he doing here? But he plays Rimmer, who's kind of a low-level company man, like a classic kind of like jerk who wants to get ahead and is really like lords it over the people underneath him, but like is he's a jerk, but like a very like easy to tear down jerk.
Yeah. Well, he's got a little bit of the bouncer complex, right? He has a small group of people that are underneath him, and he's trying to rule it with an iron fist, but he doesn't really have any respect and or authority. And
he keeps trying to take that officer exam, but every time he does, he faints.
Yeah. And this gag plays out later. He's taken it again, and he's getting taken away in a straitjacket.
Yeah, this time he's lost his mind.
Yeah, I was just like, how hard is this? Is that the joke? Is how difficult the test is, or is it how ill-equipped he is?
It's how ill-equipped he is. I think people easily pass this basic test. He just is unable to. The pressure is too much for him.
Right.
And then there is a robot we're introduced to, Crichton is his name. And he is the only character on this played by the same actor who was on the UK version. Though I think he picks up this character around the third series in the UK version. So I think he's only done a couple series at this point. But like they brought him to America, and he's like the prosthetics are kind of cool on the robots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's sort of he's still flesh toned, the same color as skin as his own skin, but he sort of is. They've added kind of prosthetics and makeup to sort of make him more angular.
It's a little bit. It's like halfway between like Max Headroom or something.
Yeah, similar.
Or do you remember the robots on Tech War? For some reason, it reminded me of the androids on Tech War.
Did they have? Well, they had funny foreheads, didn't they?
Yeah, they had like a weird, like flattened forehead.
Yeah,
It's kind of like that. It's just like they're perfectly human. They just have a bit of a weird angular look to their faces.
And he seems to have all of the personality traits and feelings and everything of a human. He just take his head off. That's basically it.
Yeah. And he's, for some reason, has just joined the crew. So he's kind of the new guy who's going to comment on what, I guess, new things that he's seeing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of that social awkwardness or inappropriateness to what he says because he's a robot.
Yeah. And we kind of kick off with a bit of character development for Dave Lister as when we meet him, he's being broken up with by a woman he's seeing, a woman named Chris, because he's commitment phobic. So we get to learn about him and how he's having trouble holding down a relationship. And
I only recognize her from Seinfeld.
Oh, did you?
She was one of George's girlfriends. I'm pretty sure she was the one who played the piano, and he wanted her to think about him while she played the piano. I think that's what one of the girlfriends.
Good memory.
Yeah.
At any rate, after he gets broken up with, Crichton drops by his quarters to kind of get comfort him, to tell him how sorry he is about that breakup, because Crichton got to witness the whole thing and be a bit of a third wheel for it.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's at Lister's quarters, a security alert sounds about an unauthorized animal on the ship, and Lister's forced to reveal that he has a secret pet cat he's brought on the ship, and he's like, Crichton, I need you to hide this cat. And Crichton reveals as he's given the cat, he's like, as a robot, I guess you can sense these things or you can see them, that the cat is pregnant as well. So he's like, you need to hide my pet cat so that the ship doesn't execute it.
And they don't mention, and it's not what this show is concerned about, but they don't mention why they have to execute the cat, I don't think. I assume it's
just kind of a foreign entity on a spaceship.
Right. That's what I assume. But they don't really say. They're just like, we need to execute that cat.
Yeah, the cat can't be here. It's going to get tossed out of an airlock, so can you please hide this cat for me, Crichton? Of course, both Lister and Crichton are caught on ship's cameras, like, with the cat, so the captain just immediately calls them both down to the bridge to, like, tell her, because they don't quite know where they put the cat, but, like, they have clear video evidence that both of them have, like, conspired to hide the cat. Mm-hmm. They're called down. Lister won't give up the cat because he doesn't know where Crichton hid it, and Crichton is programmed to follow orders, but he's doing his best not to reveal the truth of where the cat is to the captain. So he starts shaking around, shooting smoke out of his various joints.
He basically starts breaking down because he is trying his best not to reveal the secret, but because it counteracts with his programming, he sort of like starts breaking down, and then for some reason his eyeballs pop out and fall into someone's coffee.
That was pretty good. I like when the eyeballs fall on the car.
Yeah. And then what was the joke right after that? Do you remember what the hilarious joke was the one guy said?
No, I don't.
He's like, in some cultures, that's a delicacy.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
That's it. That was the joke. We haven't mentioned enough of the jokes, by the way, that have happened along the way. There was one where we see a hologram at the beginning, and because on this they mention, and I don't know if you caught the line, Luke, is that in the future, everyone has essentially are scanned to be holograms, so that when they die, they have to keep working.
Yes.
So we see at the beginning, there's a guy who's a hologram, and he mentions that he's a hologram and that he can't, like he goes through things, which made me think, I don't know how he works. Like, I don't know how he works on the keyboard and stuff, but regardless. And he makes the joke that he can't touch anything except for himself, so it's just like his sex life.
Yeah, it's a great joke, Jordan.
And not only do they do this, but a spoiler for the remake pilot, they have someone else do that joke again.
I mean, not a lot of them, but several of the jokes from both pilots have just transitioned over. They're like, well, this one still works.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're all pretty weak jokes. This is why I'm probably skimming past them. Like, none of them like landed as being particularly funny.
No, but I think we should mention them for posterity.
Oh, good, just so they're remembered for the ages. At any rate, the captain basically tells Lister like he's not going to give up the cat. He's going to get criminal charges pressed against him, and Lister won't do it. He won't let his cat be thrown in an airlock. So he gets carted off, and he's going to be basically put into stasis until they get back to Earth in 6 months. And when he gets back to Earth, he'll basically be prosecuted for bringing fauna onto the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And, as he's getting put into the cryostasis chamber, the Chris, the woman he has a crush on, returns, and she's just like, oh, I kind of, I respect what you did, so maybe we can, like, give this relationship another try. Like, that was really kind of you not to give up. Like, you didn't want your cat to die, which is, you would hope human, very, very basic human instinct.
But I think it's supposed to be that she's seen another side of him, and she's like, I'll give him another chance. He gets put in the stasis, which is like kind of glass wall, like glass door that I don't know why he needs to be on display. But then she sort of like mouths, I love you, whatever. And he's like, oh, this is great. This is going to work out. And then immediately he's frozen.
Yeah. There seems to be this moment where he's just like, actually, I'll tell you where the cat is because I want to hang out with this girl again.
And so they freeze him. I think he's supposed to be frozen for 6 months, right?
Yeah, 6 months till they get back to Earth. So he's put into stasis, and as we cut from him, like, pretty much like he's there frozen, and we just stay with him frozen, and we cut to sometime in the future. He comes out of stasis, and as he steps out of the chamber, the entire ship is empty. The computer Holly informs him that the entire crew has been killed by a radiation leak, and it's been so long. All that exists of the crew now are just like piles of white dust on the ground.
Yeah, and actually, there was a joke, and I can't remember exactly what it is. Oh, I know what it is. So he goes, and he's like, what's this white dust? And I don't know why he would do this, but he picks up and tastes it, and she sort of mentions, like, oh, that's your old coworker that is now dust. And he's like, pugh. And then she makes some sort of joke about, he's like, what do we do with all this stuff? And she mentions that you can use it for, like, de-icing your driveway or whatever. And I know I'm butchering the joke, but there was something so dark about it, and it gave me a little chuckle. But that was the only time in this episode where I was like, all right. More of these very dark jokes about what to do with the remains of the crew.
Well, it's kind of why I think Holly gets the best lines in it, because she gets to be the computer who just like delivers factual information without like, I mean, it's not without emotion, but it can be just like really dark and like straight. And like she gets the best lines as a result.
Yeah, well, and that's the kind of the point here is that she's sort of giving him straight information that is pretty horrible information for him. So he sort of asks how long has he been out for, because it's been 6 months, and she's like, oh, you're gonna laugh at this. It's been 3 million years that you've been frozen, and I've just been waiting to defreeze you because we've been waiting for the radiation to go to be at a level that you can survive.
It takes a long time for radiation to decay, and so in a very hard science fiction way, it's taken 3 million years to get to the point where she can unfreeze the only person in stasis to come back to the ship.
Yeah.
She does have good news, though. They still have a holographic projection device, and as you said, in the future, after you die, they have like a personality chip that they can be used to like make you a hologram so you can continue like doing your job. But only one of these personality chips has survived, and of course, in classic comic fashion, his old annoyance, Rimmer, is the only one that's made it back.
And here's another joke that happens. So he gets projected back, or whatever you'd say, and he's now a hologram. And what's the main person's name in the show?
Lister.
Lister's like, oh, Rimmer, you're back. What's death like? And there's a joke that's in both pilots too. He says, it's like an Amish bachelor party. And I don't get what the joke is. I don't get
you were dying on the floor. You couldn't
what's
believe
the joke?
How funny it was.
Is the joke that Amish don't have bachelor parties, or is it that their bachelor parties are boring, or is it that I don't understand? It's like what's the joke?
I mean, I think the joke is just like, here are two things that don't go together, and you can't even picture what that would mean. So I guess death is unknowable.
Oh, all right. I don't know how that would land, even in the British version. If that's the joke, I don't know how that lands.
Yeah, I mean, the joke is just like, here's two disparate things we put together, and you're like, okay.
Anyway, the point of it is they seem to be the last two people, even though one's not a real person, and then the computer lets them know there is one other life form on board.
Well, we should know, too, and we haven't talked about this at all, and I don't know if you know this from the original Red Dwarf thing, but like they did kind of create one very classic shorthand for holograms that has been like used in lots of places since then. But holograms in the Red Dwarf universe just have an H, like the actor just has an H pasted to the top of their head, so that's how you know they're a hologram. And it's honestly one of the things that, like, even having not watched much of it, I know about it, and it's such a funny shorthand that, like, I think actually has like become a little iconic.
Sure, I'll tell you, it's a very budget conscious way of doing it.
Yeah, it's a good. I always thought that was a clever way of doing it, and I think like it has stood the test of time as a like thing that like it's known for. Like it's an iconic image from this series.
Right.
You hated it though.
I don't really have a feeling on it. It just, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. I don't know.
As you said, the computer Holly lets them know that it's detected a life form on the ship, and as they go to look for it, they stumble across Crichton the robot's head on a shelf. I guess he was being reassembled when the radiation leak happened, so his head has just been sitting on a shelf for 3 million years waiting for someone to put it back on his body.
Yeah, and here's another. It was another joke that I think there's something here, but I don't know why it didn't really work, at least for me. So they come down and they see his head sitting on the shelf, and they're like, "Oh, you're still alive." And he's like, "Yeah, I've just been waiting for people." They're like, "What have you been doing the whole time?" And he said, "I've just been reading that fire exit sign." And and the joke being obviously fire exit. That's all he's been reading. And there's something there. I don't know. It just something about the beat or the delivery or something. The joke didn't work, because I think it's a kind of funny concept of you just keep reading the same two words over and over for 3 million years.
Yeah, I mean that's just the joke. Is like anyone else would have got insane, but he's just a robot, so he doesn't care. He just read that sign.
So again, it's just that when you're watching it, it's on paper, you're like, that's funny, and then you see it on the screen, you go, it just doesn't really work.
Your results may vary. I'm sure someone loved it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, people love other space, Jordan.
That's true. Well, Nico does.
But the search for this life form continues into a cargo bay, where Crichton remembers is the same cargo bay he had hidden the pregnant cat 3 million years ago.
I know this was, I'm sure, a replication of the British version because they have this cat character, but what an odd idea. And I guess that's why you need it to be 3 million years for this to happen. But isn't this the most bizarre idea for creating a science fiction character?
I mean, it is the one thing that I think is sort of interesting about Red Dwarf. It does not working in this series, but I think it's the thing that people enjoy about the other series is like a lot of their jokes are just dumb, quick ones. But then the other half of their jokes are like really hard science fiction jokes. And this one is here is the computer will show up and show an animation explaining that the cat was pregnant, had a litter, and then over the course of 3 million years, slowly but surely, a cat civilization like evolved and formed and grew up in this cargo hold and like lived many lives. And there was just like so many of them that at some point a civil war would break out, killing all but one. And now this is like the civil war has just ended, and now we only have one character left, and it's this cat. And it's like it's very like Hitchhiker's Guide from the Galaxy kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of that is something and I'm sure the British version does, but it's something that I wish this show leaned into more, because it's such an odd concept. And then the result, as we're going to learn, is there's a humanoid type cat. That's the character we're going to meet, who, for all intents and purposes, on first appearances looks just like a human, but has cat tendencies or cat personality. That's basically what we have.
Feline features on their face and some cat tendencies. And it's played by a Broadway star named Hilton Battle.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think, first of all, in your pilot, if you're going to cast a Broadway star, like at least let him sing a little in your pilot. That's why you cast him.
I'm sure it was just for like dance-esque sort of cat movements was what they were going for.
But yes, they find him, and that sort of finally gets to the full cast together. We now have the last man on Earth, the hologram, the robot, and this cat who's evolved for 3 million years. Which, it works in the British show, but we don't get to spend any time with any of these characters in this episode. It's all just like
it's all introductions,
set up, basically.
Yeah.
They all end up returning to the bridge to meet with Holly, and as they get there, suddenly a wormhole opens on the bridge, and what they see is themselves from the future appear on the bridge of the Red Dwarf, minus Rimmer. He's not there, and he's very concerned by his absence. But who's added is that girl who had a crush on who Lister had a crush on. Chris, for some reason, is somehow alive, stepping through this wormhole from the future to talk to them.
And they've basically come to give them a message, something very important. It's like, we've come here all this way, and we have this thing. You have to be very careful. And just before they explain the message, they sort of just disappear. Yeah.
They keep getting distracted by like people having questions that aren't the purpose of their trip, and they're like, "This is taking a lot of energy for us to send us back here to tell you this message." And they're like, "But here's what's important: you got to." And then, of course, the power cuts out, and they are zapped away, so nobody knows what the message was supposed to be.
But the lead character guy basically, he sort of decides that what it must be is try to get home. That's what it must be, or at least that's the direction they're going to go in after this non-message.
I did like how he just like got no information. He's like, well, it's got to be they want us to go home. That's the only answer.
Yeah.
And he goes and he's like, all right, Holly, let's go back home. And Holly reveals that the Red Dwarf has actually been accelerating away from Earth for the last 3 million years since the radiation leak. So they are quite a distance from Earth as well.
But what does he say? She's like, we're never going to get back. And he's like, maybe there's a shortcut.
It's just like Voyager. Maybe there's a shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, Jordan. Borg wormholes.
That's right.
And this sort of ends it in a comic scene where he keeps trying to he's like, well, I'll just punch in the coordinates and turn the ship around. And every time he pushes a button, like the lights go on or a radio turns on. He can't quite figure out which is the right button. And finally he just like leans against the console and the rockets fire.
And then we get a sequence that was so odd. And I know why they did it, but watching the episode, it seemed like a real, like your neck was just snapped back. They're like, and here's other things that are going to happen. And they have like old Daphne from Frasier. They got her head floating on space, and she's just telling you like future adventures we're going to have. And they show clips, and I'm assuming it's clips from the British show that they've just repurposed here. But it's just like, here's other adventures you're going to have.
Yeah, Lister's going to learn to fly a space shuttle, and it's going to be banged around.
Mm-hmm.
Rimmer's going to make himself a biological body to get out of his hologram body, and it's going to explode in a gooey mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crichton's going to meet a lady robot and fall in love, but that lady robot's actually going to be a really slimy, gooey space alien.
Mm-hmm.
And many more.
And many, many more.
But yes, that sort of wraps up, and you can really see like they're like, we made this pilot, and like even when it ends and they're like, he leans on the button and the ship rockets, I was like, is that like, it didn't even feel like it was the end of the episode. It was kind of like the episode just stopped, and then they're like, here's future adventures. I'm like, okie dokie, this feels like this was clearly never going to air, this pilot.
Yeah, it feels incomplete at best.
Yeah, this was at best a like proof of concept to show an executive. There's no way this could have ever gone on television.
Yeah, agreed.
But we'll take a quick moment, because as we said, they shot this pilot, they stopped down. Some of it's working, some of it's not, according to the executives. So like, let's bring the UK guys in. Let's shoot like, I think it was like a 10-minute teaser for like an alternate pilot. So it's not a full pilot. It's more of a teaser for what a pilot could be with a slightly rejigged cast.
Now, well, before we speak about it, how did you feel? How effective did you think this was as not a retooling of the pilot, but a way to try to like pick pieces and kind of fix it as a sellable content, I suppose? Like, did you think it was because basically what we're going to get, and we'll talk about it, is like there's a lot of kind of talking heads, like talking direct to the screen to kind of narrate over footage that they don't have. That's the basic concept. And like you said, they kind of shoot a couple like one-handers, over, in front of a screen sort of thing as a way to try to get around it. Did you think it was effective? Do you think it worked at all?
I mean, it's an interesting idea. Like, I get the concept of shooting it as a promo. In some ways, you have the advantage of you can steal footage from the British show and the pilot to like give it a bit more context and like what it might look like. Mm-hmm. And I think because it's a comedy, they need to shoot these one-handers with the cast, or like these like two-handers where they're just like in a room, just to show it's like, here's what jokes are going to be like on the show. Like, I understand why it's connected that way and how they're trying to like frame it. Ultimately, I didn't find it any funnier than the pilot, so I think it's a failure. And then it's just like, you made a pilot, didn't quite work, and then you just kind of repeated the same thing but in a shorter form.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I actually think the structure as you're saying, when you watch the pilot we just talked about, it doesn't feel like a pilot. It feels like a proof of concept, as you mentioned. And as a proof of concept, I think it's a failure. Now they do this second, which seems to be purposely made as a proof of concept, and I think it works better. The problem is the content they keep cutting to, like you're saying, to showcase the show and the characters and the jokes doesn't work. So then you're now just showcasing something that didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's more forgivable for like some of the lackluster because it's more of a promo piece, but like it's not any funnier, unfortunately, which is the thing it needs to be. You know what it reminded me of a lot is you remember when we watched the Earth 2 promo?
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing.
It was very similar to be like, we'll take what we have. We've got all this footage of a show that has a lot of budget to it, and we'll just take that to give it like the sheen, and then we'll just kind of restructure something around it and be like, this is what it'll be later.
Why don't we talk about it? Because this is only a 10-minute thing. And it starts with two guys, and one is our lead, and who was the other dude?
Lister is the same actor, like the lead is Lister's back, and then they've just recast Rimmer, so that's the hologram, and they're just hanging out in like a bunk basically, and you're supposed to get the sense, it's like buddy comedy in there where they have to sleep basically, and they're both just watching TV.
They're discussing the sexiness of the Flintstone characters is what they're talking about.
Yeah. Is Wilma sexy is the question of it.
So that's one of the few things that is in this that is not really like it's not clips from what we had previously seen, and it's weird because I don't know if that joke makes it better,
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to show what the tone of it is. It's like a hangout. It's basically a lot of this. Like I think they're like it's going to be a lot of hangout humor where they're just doing something and like just talking about pop culture, and like that's sort of what that is. But like none of it's particularly funny. Mm-hmm. The next gag is they kind of do a scene where Lister is talking into the camera, very Big Brother confessional style, basically trying to explain to the viewer and then in world anyone who finds this messenger pod what has happened. He's basically giving the like. Exposition as to what this show's about. Like, I'm in the future because I got cryofroze. Now I'm stuck here with like all these different characters. And then the gag here is that like the hologram will stick his head and says, "Oh, you're not recording. The red light's on. That means it's not recording. You got to push the button, and the green light will come on, and then you're recording." And then like he's like, "Oh, thank you." He like leans in to push the button. The whole screen goes black, and then comes back up, and they're like, "Well, that was a great recording. Let's send this pod out." The idea being like they turned it off and shot nothing into space.
And I'll say, as a convention of a promo, I think this was a good idea. It's a cheap way. It gets a lot of information across. It's just that what they cut to is still not very funny.
Yeah, and I mean, what this is it gives them a chance to introduce all the characters who are going to be shown. So there's like, he's like, then there's Rimmer, this hologram. It's very funny is they use the scene from the pilot where the hologram first appears. So like you get the whole effect of the hologram appearing, but then they have to hard cut really quickly as the actor who played Rimmer appears because they've recast him. So it's now cut to like a very like awkward close up of this new actor being like, "Hi, it's me, I'm new." I think he even makes the Amish joke there. He's like, "I'm back, and you know what death's like? An Amish funeral."
Yeah. They make that joke again because, again, it's just like it worked so well the first time.
You can really tell which jokes the British guys wrote in the original pilot because they're like, "We're bringing those ones back."
Yeah.
And they, of course, show the computer, who is Holly. They mostly use footage of Jane Leaves from the original pilot. It's very funny. She'll pop back for some new footage very near the end of the 10 minutes. Completely different hairstyle.
I laughed at that too. Well, actually, the guy who plays Lister also has different facial hair and different hair length. So this clearly was shot sometime later because, Jane Levy, is that her name?
Jane Leaves.
Who's Jane Levy?
I mean, you're thinking of the Levy. Oh, Jane Levy's in the Evil Dead movie, the remake.
Sure. Anyways, Jane Leaves. Yeah, her hair's like inches longer. So I was like, how long do they take to working on this? Like a whole year? Well,
it feels like her hair looks like she does in Frasier. So I almost feel like she's shooting the pilot to Frasier right now. Like, right. I guess I'll come back for 2 seconds for this. So they introduce her, they bring up Crichton, and it's so funny because I don't know if you noticed this in the YouTube write-up, like there's in the synopsis under the YouTube video, the person who uploaded it explains that they're like, and there's a robot named Crichton, and then like you don't see anything about Crichton. Apparently YouTube flags the section with Crichton because it's all footage from the British show. They just used a scene from the British show and just like didn't shoot anything new with him. So YouTube flags it and removes it from the actual thing. So you don't see any of whatever that was.
Well, anyways, it doesn't really matter. It would have been something we saw before.
And then finally, they introduce the recast Cat, and this time, this is where Terry Farrell from Deep Space Nine comes in. She's now a female version of the Cat, and we get to see like a little two-hander where her and Lister are like walking around the ship, and they explain that you don't see anything. It's just like them walking in a corridor, and Lister's explaining that like we're hunting an armor-plated genetic mutant who wants to impregnate us with his demon seed.
Yeah, they're really just trying to show again the tone of what you're gonna have, and then they also want to play, I think, a little bit of the sexual tension between these two characters.
Well, they've gender swapped the Cat, and in doing so, they're like, she's now our sex symbol. Like you can really tell they're making poor Dax do a lot of heavy lifting of being like, be real sexy for everybody.
Yeah. But it's a weird idea, isn't it? Let's say this became a series and they wanted that to be a love interest, but she's a cat.
And there's no chemistry between them. Like you can actually see the two actors like actively trying to like not do the thing they've written.
Yeah.
Like you can see them being like, I know you want us to have like something, but like we ourselves find it uncomfortable. So we're like, they're trying to tone down any like potential sexual chemistry.
It's funny. The uncomfortableness is like palpable.
Yeah. They're like, if this goes to series, we don't want to do this. So we're going to like make sure it doesn't work. And then they go into, it's very funny. They're like, and now we're going to show you what some possible episodes might look like. And they're like, they each get titles too. Like I think one is like Crash Landing or something. It's called
Marooned.
And what you see is a shot from the British show, I'm sure, where a little shuttle crashes on an ice planet. You know, real good effects work, way more money than this thing I had to make anything with. So they're just like stealing from the British show. And then what you see is you see Lister and the hologram Rimmer, and they're sitting in front of a white piece of cloth to like represent the ice planet because they don't have anything. It's just a white cloth on a wall.
Yeah, and they're in front of what I guess is supposed to be like a futuristic type fire thing to heat them up. And you know what's weird is I was like, oh, this is kind of cute. I just thought the conversation they're having was so dumb. It's supposed to be like a bonding moment, you know, that like you've seen it many times in TV shows. Characters are stranded, so thus they open up to each other in a way they haven't before, and you learn more about them. And this is they're having a conversation about when they lost their virginity. And I just thought, it's so tacky.
I mean, that's exactly what, I mean, when have you ever had that conversation?
Exactly. No one has had this conversation. And I'll give this to the show. It's not done in a way to be gross. The joke is really supposed to be that Rimmer is such a asexual character or such a dweeb or whatever they're doing. He's so uptight that he's more concerned about is vehicles, and he likes cars. So when he finally says the story about how he lost his virginity, which was in a car, he's really, instead of, you know, giving the nitty-gritties about the girl, he's giving the information about the car. That's really the joke.
I mean, it's exactly like the opening where they're watching TV. It's just like a hangout moment. Like, it's like, here's two characters hanging out, having a convo. Like, this will be what part of the show's like. We're either going to be hunting genetic mutants who want to impregnate us with their demon seed, or it's going to be doing some hangout comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because really, and the next one, I don't remember the name of the second possible episode. We get like a title card. It's like, this episode's called Rocket Attack or something.
Right.
And then what we see is like Cat, Lister, and Rimmer are all like leaning over a monitor like, oh no, an alien has shot a rocket at us. What are we going to do? And like, this is supposed to be like, oh, here's where we're going to have some fun, like low stakes action coming in. And like this is where Jane Leaves reappears as the computer Holly. She repeats a joke from the first pilot where like
the siren joke.
Some sparks shoot out of her. She's like, sparks are shooting out of me. Actually, that one felt all right.
Yeah. They were like that. You got to keep that in.
Yeah, it looks great. It's great. So it's a sort of such a weird little piece where they're like, here's some things, and then like, you know, a lot of clips from the original show to kind of like fill out like how it could look or what it might feel like. But it's such an odd little teaser to like. It definitely was just like they weren't set up for success. Like if I mean they were. It's so weird to be. They were given the chance to try again, but they really didn't. Like it's not exponentially better than the original American pilot. Even by bringing the British guys in, it still feels almost the same.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it feels like you're like, well, here, can you come fix this thing? But we're going to handcuff you in every way possible. So what's the point of doing this?
I mean, I agree. They definitely handcuffed them. Like they weren't given the opportunity. But it's also not like the British guys came in and were like, well, they really messed up their material. We're going to come in and really show how different our material is. Like you can't like you. honestly, if you didn't know it was by two different creators, you would think it's the same guy wrote both.
I
things.
would agree. I agree.
Like, it doesn't feel like it's an improved. It's just like cheaper.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it would have been different if this was just chock full of jokes. Do you know what I mean? Like they're like, we don't have any money, so we're just gonna have characters just saying funny things. We can cut clips of that. It's like that'd be one thing, but the only jokes that are repurposed are unfunny jokes to begin with, or at least jokes that don't land, and then the rest is just like, it's supposed to develop characters, like you're saying, showing that they're hanging out, but then the scenes aren't funny either. So you're like, okay, thanks for showing us this.
No, I know, it's very funny to watch them like recycle jokes from the pilot where like you're like, what, like, so you watch the original pilot and you're like, oh, they totally fucked up my joke there. Let's show them how it's done, and then you just deliver it in the exact same way.
Yeah, exactly. Or as opposed to like this, for whatever reason, just doesn't translate the same way, whether it's the accent, the rhythm, the actual context of the show just doesn't work. It's like, just try it again.
I mean, I read a little piece on I'm on Wikipedia where they're talking to the actor who plays the robot Crichton, and maybe this was in your documentary, I'm not sure. He had mentioned that he had done 2 of the British series already, and he was coming over here to do the American one. And he said he showed up to set, and he was like, on the British set, I'm really wacky, and I like do all kinds of like funny things to keep the cast entertained. I'm really like, I guess he must be, and on the British show they think he's so funny, and it keeps the end, like everyone's like loving it and they're having a great time. And he's like, I showed up and I was kind of doing the same thing. I was bringing the same wacky energy off camera and like goofing around with the cast. And he's like, none of the American cast enjoyed it. They didn't like what I was doing, and we did not think it was fun or funny. And he's like, whereas my British co-stars always thought it was fun and funny. So maybe part of it is just like they're having so much fun doing the British show, and on the American show it's just like nobody's having any fun at all.
Yeah. You've said it before, but this did seem like it was set up to fail.
It definitely was not working in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, and that's really the kick of the bucket for the Americans. Your sort of classic thing of trying to redo a British thing and it not working.
Well, definitely did not work here.
Yeah. So let's want to rate these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give it a 1. There's probably one moment I enjoyed it.
You know what? Much like this show and repurposing jokes, Luke, I'm also gonna give it a 1.
I mean, it deserves what it got, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I'll give this to it, and why I'll give it a 1 is that, and perhaps this is not fair, this isn't mean-spirited at all, and I feel like everyone tried, and I feel like the actors are really trying. I feel like the writers are really trying. Everyone involved wants to make something that's good. I think even the dumb executives who didn't know what they were doing and were probably interfering, I think everyone was genuinely a fan of the British version. That's why they wanted to make this, but just through bad decisions, through bad casting, through bad writing, through all these, it just doesn't work. But I don't get the sense that it was out of malice or because no one cared. You know what I mean? Like, that would be worse. It's just something that, like, for whatever reason, everything they tried just doesn't work.
Never translated. And as you know, Jordan, 1992, just before like the first Star Trek spin-off series, this was the time where every network was just like, people really like this Star Trek show. How can we make more of them? And they were really, we've watched some of them. They were really taking as many kicks at the can as they could. And this was just like one seemed to be working somewhere else. Or like maybe it'll work here, and it just didn't. It
just didn't work. Yeah, and it's bad. Like, that's the thing. Like, this is just bad. Like, the best thing it has going for it is it's short, but it's like it's not entertaining, which is a bummer because like it could be. It's just not.
Better or worse than Other Space?
Oh, this is worse.
No, okay.
This is worse than Other Space, yeah.
I don't have any strong opinion either way.
Yeah, I mean, and again, another show just doesn't really work, but every now and then they got a little bit more chance to have things work. They had episodes, right? This is one. If this maybe had 6 episodes or 8 episodes, maybe some things would have gelled a little bit more, but in a pilot, no, this is not
This is a bad pilot for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, that about wraps it up. So, listener, you can email us, continuumdrag@gmail.com if you have anything you want to let us know about. And on Instagram and Twitter, we will have some clips from Red Dwarf USA. So you can, they're really, I mean, as you said,
the quality's bad.
Pilot was passed around a lot, so the quality has degraded, like, over the decades.
Yeah, there's a few different versions of it and varying qualities and a few different cuts and stuff. But yeah, there's clear degradation.
Yeah. I've had to really skim through it to pick out the like clearest shots for these clips. But that wraps it up for this episode. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
I will see you then. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.